Today, this morning was a huge day in the life of my 5-year-old son, Noah. Today, he had a field trip scheduled. He's in pre-kindergarten. This, I think, is his 3rd field trip that he's had in his life. He was going to the Outdoor Discovery Center, which is a little bit south of Holland, very similar to this facility, where they take you into a room like this, and they have one of the rangers talk to you about different animals, and they brought out some birds of prey. You got to see a great horned owl, which he was kind of afraid of. He was backing away. He said the wingspan is really big. Those are really big. Also, to get to the Discovery Center, he got to ride on a bus, a school bus. That's the 4th time in his life he's been on a school bus. Today was huge for him. And I got the privilege of getting to join him for that field trip. And it was awesome to see the excitement, and not only him, but the other students. And I felt a little bit of that excitement about being at this field trip. Now, I don't know if I would imagine most of you have some kind of a recollection of a field trip or multiple field trips that you took during the year, your school years. For me, that's something that I always enjoyed, going on field trips. And I went to a number of the different field trips where you go to maybe a museum or a farm or a historical village type thing, and enjoyed those. But when I was in high school, as a senior, I got to go on kind of the capstone field trip of my life. I had a teacher. His name was Mr. Wagner. He was probably my favorite teacher. And he had kind of lived an adventurous life. He had lived out in Wyoming and was an outdoorsman, an avid hunter. He had this fantastic game room that had all kinds of exotic animals from around the world that he had hunted and had stuffed. And he knew a lot about the outdoors. But he had moved to Ohio, which is where I was living, Northwest Ohio, and had started a class called the a conservation class that students would take, and there were 2 of them in the state of Ohio at the time. And later he started a class that was called the Advanced Problems in Resource Conservation class, and you had to take the first class before you could take the second. And it was a very select group of students that made it to the second class. The class size was usually maybe 5 to 9 students. The year that I took the class, there were 11 students in the class. And in the spring of that year, and it was the senior year for me, we got to go on this 5-day field trip. And the itinerary for it was you would go to northern Minnesota. You'd visit some sites there, some natural sites there. Then you'd come east across the border to Wisconsin. And he had a friend or an acquaintance that he had made, and you'd stay out in a cabin. You had to hike 5 miles out into the cabin, and that was quite an interesting experience. We didn't even get to the trailhead until after dark because we're seeing so many things. So we walked back in the dark, and there's a story about that. But then we moved on. We went into the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. We got to go to Porcupine Mountain State Park, visit Lake of the Clouds there. Went further east, made it to Seney National Wildlife Refuge, a great migratory bird. It's an area where the migratory birds cross through. Got to go to Pictured Rocks National Lake Shore. Before the season had actually started there, but got to go out on a tour for a couple hours on a boat, and then pushed on over to Lake Superior State College, where a former student of his was working there as a fisheries biologist. Got to see what they were doing there. We woke up one morning early, well before dawn, and went out to a prairie field type thing to see prairie chickens strutting. And on our way back to Ohio, we crossed through the lower peninsula and went through elk country. The Pigeon River area. And driving through back roads there and little trails, and this maybe should have been a little foreshadowing for me. At one time when we were driving through just a narrow 2-track, Mr. Wagner stopped the vehicle. We had 2 vans, and he stopped, he hopped out, and he started running. And he's chasing these black animals that are on all fours, and they're running. And it's 2 black bear cubs. He chases them, and he gets to a tree, and they run up the tree, and he's there kind of at the bottom of the tree looking at them. And everybody, all the kids get out of the van. There are 9 of us students that went on the trip, and 1 chaperone and Mr. Wagner. And we're all standing around looking up there. And I'm kind of standing back a little bit because I'm thinking, we'd learned a lot about bears. Part of the curriculum, we had studied bear attacks. And so I'm thinking about this. I'm thinking, usually where there are bear cubs, there are also is a mama bear somewhere nearby. And I wonder if that's going to be an issue for us here. The vans are way over there. If that bear comes between us and the vans, what's going to happen? That's on my mind, but we never saw the mama bear. And we proceeded on and got home. So it was like a whirlwind trip, 2,200 miles in 5 days. We saw all kinds of stuff, learned stuff. It was really epic. And for me, I was a young person who hadn't done a lot of traveling. That was one of the few trips that I had taken in my life. It was awesome. So fast forward, I stayed in touch with Mr. Wagner through the years, and 5 years later, he asked if I'd be willing to be a chaperone for the trip. And so I was very excited about it. They had their largest class ever. They had, I think, 17 students. I'm not sure if they all went, but they had 2 vans that were packed with kids. And then Mr. Wagner had me drive his pickup truck with 2 of the students in it. And so we went around, and we started on the routine, the trip. And this time, for me, it was so cool because I knew what to expect. I'd been through it. I knew you could survive it, and it was just awesome. And it was neat to see, and the kids seeing how they were reacting, very much like I reacted the first time through. And I thought, wow, this is so cool to see what's happened in the last 5 years for me. And so we went around through Minnesota to the cabin out in the woods. And over into the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and got to the Porcupine Mountain State Park. And I was really looking forward to seeing Lake of the Clouds. And we're driving through Porcupine Mountain State Park, and the road weaves back and forth and up and down as you're going through, and it's tree-lined on both sides. And now Mr. Wagner, I guess I would say he was a little bit of an impulsive person. He was a great teacher, but he could, as we're driving along, we're on CBs the whole way, and he'd be calling out, what's that tree over there? Do you see those animals over there? What birds are those? What's the scientific name, the Latin name for those? He's asking all kinds of questions, and all of a sudden, he's in the lead vehicle, and then the second van is in front of me, and then I'm coming up third. All of a sudden, he darts over to the side of the road, slams on the brakes, throws the door open, and he starts running. What's going on? What's going on? And then you could see he's chasing something. And what it is, I'd never seen one live before. It was a porcupine. And he's chasing this porcupine. And the porcupine's going as fast as it can go. They aren't really good runners, but it's full size. And the porcupine gets to a tree before Mr. Wagner can get there, and starts running up the tree. And climbs up the tree and thinks, okay, I'm not happy about this, but I'm safe. Mr. Wagner calls to me, Steve, there are 2 axes in the back of my truck. Get those axes out. What? Yeah, get in the back of my truck. There are 2 axes back there. So I dig around in the back of his truck. I get the 2 axes, and he takes one, and the other chaperone takes the other one, and they go over to this tree. It's a huge pine tree, probably maybe 75 feet tall, and they start chopping it, chopping. They're both working at it, one from each side, chopping. And so I'm kind of standing back, thinking about this. It kind of reminds me of that bear scene. And all the students are gathered up around watching what's going on, and I'm looking. I'm not like a trigonometry or geometry genius, but I'm looking at this tree, and I'm looking where the vehicles are at, and thinking there could be a problem here. And I go up to Mr. Wagner, and he usually is thinking through every detail, but Mr. Wagner, I'm not sure the vehicles are going to be out of where that tree might fall if it happens to fall towards them. He goes, okay, well, go ahead and move them. So I go ahead and I move all the vehicles forward so that I'm positive that they're clear. And they keep chopping on this tree. Chop, chop, chop. And eventually, as this is going on, the porcupine is climbing higher and higher in the tree. Thinking that, well, I'm getting a little nervous, but I'll get up as far away as I can. So the porcupine gets way up in the tree. Now, before he got done chopping, Mr. Wagner asked for some leather gloves. He had those in his truck too, and I went and retrieved those for him, gave him those gloves, and him and the other chaperone kept chopping, and eventually this tree starts to crack, and it's going to fall. And it's on, we've got the vans and the truck on one side of the road, on the south side of the road, and the tree's on the north side of the road, and the tree starts falling. And sure enough, it fell where it would have landed on at least one of the vehicles. Now the tree falls, and when it does, the porcupine falls out of the tree on the pavement, the asphalt pavement, and it's kind of stunned. It's not sure what to do at first. Instantly, and at this point, if there were kids in the room, I would have to probably modify the story a little bit, but Mr. Wagner ran over with those gloves. As soon as that porcupine landed on the pavement, he reached down, grabbed it, and deposited it back on the pavement, and then picked it up again, and then the porcupine was done. So this was all pretty eye-opening. I mean, all our eyes are like, whoa, very large. And now Mr. Wagner had explained that porcupines can be very detrimental to the forest. One porcupine, he said, what a porcupine does is chew bark when it's hungry. And so it starts chewing, but on the base of the tree. And it goes around the tree all the way around and makes a circle where the bark has been removed. And what that does is kill the tree. And one porcupine, he said, during its lifetime could kill 300 trees. So this was like the ultimate conservation lesson for us that we'd observed, where he had chosen to sacrifice one tree to save 299. But we can't exactly leave right now after this lesson because the road has been blocked because of us, Michigan Highway. So Mr. Wagner and the other chaperone start chopping. It's a huge tree. They start chopping, and as they're chopping, now their angle is different, and kids are kind of around, and he's saying, hey, get out of the way of the path of where we're chopping with the axe, because the axe heads sometimes can fly off the end of the axe. We don't want anybody to get hurt here. And he must have had to say that 10 times to get kids out of the way. So they start chopping. They had to chop the tree in thirds. Even with nearly 20 of us there, the trees were huge. The tree was huge, and so they chopped it into thirds. This took probably the better part of an hour to chop this tree, and we would all get a hold of one section and drag it just off the edge of the road. And fortunately, no cars came when we were doing this. As I look back on it, it was just a very unusual episode in my educational experience, and just an epic conservation But that is what happened, and I wanted to share that with you. So thank you.